Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today we'll be doing the event of the month, our March Q&A. As usual, I don't read the questions beforehand, so I read them as they occur. And so I don't know what I'm in for. I have no idea what I'm in for, but I have a pretty eclectic group of subscribers, and I'm pretty sure a lot of questions are going to be here that are probably going to be very interesting. So let's get into it. DeAndre Dukes, first question. When you look at how TNA was back then to where they're at now, do you ask yourself, why wasn't the company bigger than they should be? Looking at how TNA was to looking at how TNA is now, I mean, watch some of the old pay-per-views. I do ask myself, why didn't it grow? And I don't have an answer to that question, but I definitely have asked myself that. Like, why didn't TNA catch on? But it's clear the reason why they didn't catch on is they had no crossover stars. What made WCW was the crossover stars. What made Memphis crossover stars. What made the AWA crossover stars being Hulk Hogan, who crossed over to doing Rocky 3, and before that it was Verne Gagne, who was essentially a television star in the Minneapolis area. He actually done movies too. He actually started his own movie called The Wrestler way back in the day. So usually either this guy is very, very popular within that territory, like a Jerry the King Lawler, he's a local guy, or he's some type of crossover star who comes into the territory and he blows it up. What WCW did is they brought in Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was a crossover star. WWF was much bigger than WCW. And so when he came over, there was a large, sizable fan base that kind of came over with Hogan. This is why they was able to draw the biggest pay-per-view they've ever had before with Hogan in the main event, the very first time he had jumped ship to WCW. Now, of course, it died down over time because Hogan did not have, everybody, once he started doing Hulk Hogan, everybody's already seen Hulk Hogan, it took for him to do something different for it to change. And then he started bringing in Jay Leno and Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone, and that helped WCW grow. They started making crossover stars. But TNA, they didn't do it. They didn't bring in a big crossover star. They also didn't have the backing of WCW. WCW always had Turner money. And I know Bischoff would probably cringe at that. But they spent money to make money. TNA, not really. They was able to bring in Hulk Hogan. They had Hulk Hogan wrestling. But Hulk Hogan was a lot older at that point. And a lot of the guys that they did bring in, the Jeff Hardys, the Rob Van Dams, the Mr. Andersons, all those guys, they weren't as big as they needed to be. They needed something massive. They needed like a Randy Orton or an Edge or something like that to jump over at that time, like the 2006, 2007 era, or maybe even later years when these guys really got older. They just never got the talent. And what really helped WCW was the influx of talent, high level, top name talent from WWF, the Roddy Pipers, the Randy Savages, and then they brought in the celebrities. That's just made WCW jump. When you look at TNA, they didn't have that. A lot of the guys who jumped ship, Sting, Foley, Hogan, Flair, they were already old. I'm talking like really old. As in we really don't want to see them old. So I can see why TNA didn't grow, but I'd have asked myself that question. D-Mac, in your opinion, did AEW kill ROH? It's probably more nuanced than that, as I feel like the pandemic killed it and made it no longer viable. Well, here's the thing. I think the Elite killed Ring of Honor. I don't think it was AEW. I think it was the Elite and their ego. I think once the Elite saw that they can do a successful show on their own with All In, I think that was beta testing for Tony Khan. Tony Khan probably would have been like, oh, it's cool, maybe I'll do it into the wrestling thing. But once he saw they could do it on their own, he's like, what more could they do if I financed them? So Ring of Honor kind of shot themselves in the foot because they financed All In. It was ROH production equipment. They owned the tape. They let these guys put on their own show. It was massively successful. And then they left Ring of Honor, and they couldn't replace them. It was at a time when they was really, everybody got caught up in the whole Bullet Club thing with New Japan. So did AEW kill Ring of Honor? No. I agree with you. The pandemic did a lot more to damage Ring of Honor than AEW did. AEW didn't really take any of their top stars until the pandemic happened. So the pandemic made it difficult for Ring of Honor, and they were continuing to pay people even after the pandemic. There was a lot of Ring of Honor talent that was coming out saying, specifically, I think the female, I think her name is Amy Rose. She is the female manager of the Facción Ingobernable in Ring of Honor. She talked about how WWE was firing people, but Ring of Honor was still paying people even though they were running shows without fans. Even though they were shut down, they were still being paid. So the pandemic, based in bad business, led to this. Also, you had Sinclair Broadcasting fell into some financial hard times. They weren't really investing in Ring of Honor anyway. So you look at, all of these different things. On screen, I think they lost a lot of viability when they lost the Elite. I think once AEW, which is Ring of Honor with a bigger budget, came along, that damaged Ring of Honor a lot. But it was still able to chug along. Then the pandemic happened, and it was impossible to come back from that. The financial hit that it took, it was over. And I'm actually not surprised. I'm actually surprised most other companies didn't go under. Let's see. Maul, have you considered uploading your videos on alt tech sites like Rumble, Odyssey, etc.? What are your thoughts on sites like that in general? Thoughts on a Discord server for the channel? I thought about it. To me, YouTube is bigger than all of those. And what you tend to see is people will grow the channel on YouTube first and then try to get those people and move them over to the alt tech like the Rumbles or something like that. And I think if I get a big enough following on YouTube, then I'll start to do that. I'll be able to branch out to Discord and Rumble and Odyssey and stuff like that. But first, I want to establish myself on YouTube. And I've definitely been paying attention, specifically to Six Hexenhammer, who does it a lot. Like, he tries to limit the stuff he puts on YouTube because he wants people to go over to Rumble and Odyssey and different sites like that. Difference is he's been doing this for 10 years and has like a large following. I don't. So if I start, uploading stuff everywhere, for starters, I'll get lost and forget about it. Like, I started a Subscribe Star. I don't think I posted anything on it yet. It was like almost a year ago. So like, I tend to forget if I have, but I do realize you can't put all of your eggs in one basket, and there will eventually be a time where I will have to start diversifying. It's just not right now. DMAC has a second question. I see chatter from time to time online about the AEW YouTube shows being more accessible than cable TV wrestling. I am assuming this is an effort to attach a level of importance to the shows. What are your thoughts on this idea? And how would you make Dark and Elevation feel more important? Or should they remain as is, secondary shows in the same vein as the old weekend wrestling programs? AEW YouTube shows are more accessible than cable TV because the YouTube is more accessible and actually more used than cable. The thing is, I think cable is in it's a dwindling number of households, but pretty much everybody uses YouTube. And you have hundreds of billions of people on YouTube. But that's part of the problem, is that once you have hundreds of billions of people, you have to ask, what's a success level? Is 200 people good? 200 people ain't bad for somebody like me. But if it's 200 people for AEW, is that really good? Like, if they get 200,000 viewers for a Dark or a Dark Elevation, how good is that really? I don't know. It depends on what their expectations are. And if they wanted to increase the show, it would be simple. They just put bigger stars on it. You really want to increase Dark or Dark Elevation? You want people to watch your stuff on YouTube? Simple. Put bigger stars on the show. Tell people CM Punk's going to wrestle on Dark or Dark Elevation, and people will watch it. How much more would people watch it? I don't know. But I think people will watch it, for sure. And then it's there for all time when it comes to YouTube. So if they don't watch it immediately, they can watch it tomorrow. They can watch it the day after. Part of why people really watch TV is because it's first run airing, it's live, and therefore you want to see it. Dark and Dark Elevation, a lot of that stuff is spoiled before it even comes out. And then there's no real storylines, and they don't really port over to TV, so there's no real reason to watch it. And to a degree, it's kind of like, but no, because the old wrestling programs like Superstars, when Superstars was the A show, you had to watch it. There were other B shows. They used to come on like Sunday. I think Wrestling Challenge and stuff like that used to come on. But when Superstars was the A show, you had to watch that. Everything else was kind of supplementary to Superstars. When Raw came out, Raw wasn't even the A show at the time when it was created. It was the B show to Superstars. It was just another B show to Superstars. Once Raw became the A show, then everything became supplementary to Raw. And AEW does not do that. They don't use Dark and Dark Elevation as to supplement Dynamite. It's almost a different reality to Dynamite. And Rampage supplements Dynamite to a degree. And Dynamite supplements Rampage to a degree. So those are the only two products that seem to have any sort of crossover, is Rampage and Dynamite. There's very little between Dark Elevation and Dynamite and Rampage. You know what I'm saying? And it comes across like the old Attitude Era, where you had that really hard, you must be a hardcore wrestling fan to watch Metal, to watch Velocity, to watch Shotgun Saturday Night, after they started doing the gimmick of different shows and bars and stuff like that. Like, that stuff was legitimately cool, and it made the show feel fresh. But once it was just, hey, we taped a bunch of dark matches before Raw or before SmackDown, are you going to sit and watch this shit? And because it's syndicated on TV, yeah, sure, but that's how Dark and Dark Elevation feel now. It feels like Metal or Velocity. It feels like if you don't watch it, you don't miss anything. In order to increase the importance of a television program, you need to make people feel like they're missing something. If they don't feel like they're missing anything, if they don't mention Level Up on NXT, why should anybody care? If they don't mention NXT on Raw or SmackDown, why should anybody care? And that's overall the big issue. But YouTube is far more accessible because just about everybody has YouTube and just about everybody uses it. And their demographic is more likely to use YouTube than anybody else. YouTube is mostly male. So they can pretty much hit their demographic as not 100% male, by the way, but mostly male. So they're able to hit their demographic a little bit harder on YouTube. So, I think that if, worse comes to worse, the only way for them to increase the importance is to have there be cross-pollination of not only stars, but storylines. Have a big event, have a big announcement on Dark or Dark Elevation. Like, there's sometimes where you could do something like that. Like, we're going to have a big announcement on Elevation, and it could be the signing of a new star, and they're going to wrestle on this show or something like that. That might get people to watch it. But it's definitely more accessible than cable, because a lot of people don't have cable, but almost everybody got YouTube. Just address me as king. He says, what was your first big wrestling moment that you remember? The breakup of the Rockers. That's without a doubt. I started watching wrestling in 1990. But that's when I saw the Royal Rumble in 1990. It was the first event I ever watched. The second event I ever watched was Wrestlemania 6. Hogan and Warrior. Tremendous stuff. That stuff was great. I was 6. But the first time I really understood what I was looking at was when the Rockers broke up. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I didn't really get WrestleMania 6, because I wasn't that deep into wrestling. I liked the Macho Man when I saw him. I liked Ultimate Warrior. I liked Hogan. But I didn't really understand good guys and bad guys or what I was looking at until the Rockers broke up. And I was like, oh, this is nuts. Like, this is something. And that was special, like, looking back on it, you can't, it's hard to get people to relate to wrestling today, because you can't be a kid again. So that's why I kind of take it easy on people who say, this is stupid. I'm like, just imagine that there's a 7-year-old out there, and the moment they saw Stacy Keibler get an RKO or something like that, he was like, oh, like as an adult, you'd be like, okay, yeah, that's clearly within Randy's character to do that. But there's some kid out there that's like, man, what the hell? Did you just see that? And there's some parent like, oh yeah, I just saw that. That's crazy. And that's kind of how it was when the Rockers broke up. And I was just like, what? And it was so sad because I didn't like have like my dad to watch it with me or nothing like that. So I was just kind of sitting there like, what? I think I probably talked about it with my friends or something like that. But that was probably the biggest moment of my childhood. And I was it was very important in learning about good guys and bad guys and what wrestling really is. Mr. VXG, if you had to be a member of one of these factions, which one would you choose and why? The Dark Order, the HFO, or whatever Matt Hardy's group is, or the Best Friends? If I had to be a member of any group, it would probably be the HFO. Now, the reason I would probably be a member of the HFO is at least you get to hang out with Matt Hardy. And even though Matt Hardy is kind of lame, he's brothers with Jeff, and Jeff is cool. And then maybe you can get some, and then he's probably full of 20 years of advice. He worked in WWE, he worked in TNA. You probably could learn a lot from that. I don't think, what can you learn from hanging out with the Dark Order, really? Everybody in the Dark Order is a job guy, and they all suck and they're stupid. The Best Friends, I just don't see, I wouldn't want to be one of those weirdos. And the HFO, even though they're all stupid and goofy, at the very least, Matt Hardy has been somewhere and you can pick his brain and you can learn, what was it like wrestling at Wrestlemania? Being a world champion at TNA, what was it like? You can learn a lot of stuff. There's probably some real cool stories. I don't see any benefit for you on screen, but there's a lot of benefit for you off screen, Big Papi Chulo, if you had to fantasy book a WrestleMania, and I mean full on fantasy, like could include any wrestler from any era or promotion, male and female, past and present, what would it be? Love your videos, man. Your social commentary is always top notch. All right. Thank you, sir. If I had to fantasy book a WrestleMania, I don't know how many matches would be on the card, because it would be easy to say, and then you have to ask the question, like, are we going to Madden this thing? Like, do I get to say Steve Austin, but I get to say 1998 Steve Austin versus 1996 Shawn Michaels? Like, just imagine how insane that would have been. Top babyface Shawn Michaels versus top babyface Steve Austin. Shawn got booed in 96 too. He got booed in New York. So you're talking about white meat babyface Shawn versus Steve Austin. How about embittered Bret Hart, versus Kurt Angle or something like that. So you have to ask that question, and I think that would probably be the top of my card, as I would definitely be looking at the Bret Hart Kurt Angle match. I feel like we got robbed of that, and I really wanted that match to occur. But you also have, the Shawn Michaels and Eddie Guerrero. I love that too. I probably wouldn't even put Steve Austin against, I would more than likely get the Steve Austin Hogan match jumping. I think that's something. And I'm a big fan of the singles match. So that's really what my WrestleMania card would be like 100 singles matches. It'd be like 12 singles matches, each one like 10 to 15 minutes. That would be like the format. You'd probably have a couple of tag team matches too, I do like tag team wrestling, but it'd be like the awesome tag teams. Like I really want to see like the Road Warriors versus the Dudley Boys. Like that would have been really fun, because the Dudley Boys, they know how to get heat, and that's the important thing. And they're tough dudes. So you're like, oh yeah, just imagine like those two tough dudes would have been out there cutting promos and getting heat, and the Road Warriors showed up. Like, oh man. That could have been, oh boy, in a street fight type of scenario. Now, maybe not with like flaming tables and full on ECW bullshit, but something like that could have been tremendous. Then you also had Demolition. I love Demolition too. I could have found somewhere to put them. The Ultimate Warrior would have to be on the card somewhere. Randy Savage, of course, would be on there. I wouldn't know who I would put him against. or it could be like something cool like Randy Savage versus The Rock. Like nobody ever said like, what if Randy Savage could have got to wrestle The Rock? Like that would have been great. Like that would have been really good. That probably would have been more fun than Rock and Hogan, because Savage, especially at a certain point of his career, would have been far more amped. Like if you would have got like, I want to say Savage from like the 80s when he was a heel, the Macho King, against The Rock. Oh my God, bro. That would have been lit. That would have been lit. The Rock would have been talking a bunch of trash, and the Macho like, ooh, yeah. That shit would have been fun as hell. That's probably how I would have put my card together. It would be completely intergenerational. You know, if you would say like rebook a WrestleMania, that would probably be a little bit harder because I would have to remember what was on the card. But oh yeah, booking a WrestleMania, it'd be like definitely Bret and Kurt Angle, definitely Shawn and Eddie Guerrero, because Shawn actually uses a lot of lucha libre in his matches. Definitely probably would have had Steve Austin on the card. Probably wrestling either Randy Savage, you know, as a heel, either wrestling Randy Savage or wrestling Hulk Hogan. And you know, that would have been great too. Andres, if you were in charge of booking the road to WrestleMania, would you have a pay-per-view in between the Rumble and Mania? If not, how would you book the rest of the card outside of the main event? I would not do a pay-per-view. I would do a series of Saturday night's main events. You have January to April. WrestleMania is usually late March, early April. So that means you got most of January, all of February, and all of March. So you have to build up the middle of the card. I think once the Royal Rumble winners are decided, you can pretty much just start doing vignettes and cutting angles from there. They don't need to wrestle. So I wouldn't focus on that part too much. But I would start focusing on, okay, we got our championship matches. Are we going to have an attraction? Are we going to have a legend come back? Is it going to be an Edge or an Undertaker or somebody like that's going to come back and take up a big spot on the card? If that's going to be the case, you start that either at the Rumble or immediately afterwards. You know, maybe you start having a young guy cut a promo about, you know, old washed up dudes or whatever, and then you build up to that person making their return. The rest of the card, you fill out through Raw or SmackDown, and then a Saturday night's main event, which will probably be once a month on a Saturday, maybe an hour and a half show that tells the stories and pushes the stories along. And I think that's the best way to do it. I think by trying to force another pay-per-view, it almost demands that you have something, that you put something on the line. And I've always, even though I'm okay with people putting the Royal Rumble spot on the line, like, oh, I won the Royal Rumble, I'll defend my Royal Rumble position against random heel over here, or random babyface over here. Even though I understand that, I don't like it, you know? To me, they kind of started overbooking the road to WrestleMania. They started doing too much, you know? They started focusing on the road to WrestleMania too much. Instead of just telling everybody, okay, this is what the card is going to be. This is the main event. The WWF champion, whomever that may be, will wrestle Yokozuna for the WWF title at WrestleMania 9. Now we can say, who is the champion going to be? Right? So at that point, we start telling the story of who else could possibly be the champion. Who are our options? Is our options Bret the Hitman Hart, or could it be Shawn Michaels, or could it be Diesel, could it be the British Bulldog, who could it be? And then you can go from there by starting to tell the story of who's going to shake out the other end as the world champion. I think one of the best road to WrestleManias they ever booked was in '96, the road to WrestleMania 12, because Shawn won the Rumble, but you had Undertaker wrestling Bret Hart that night, you know, and it was very likely that Undertaker could have won the title. But then they had Diesel interrupt that and cost Undertaker the title. So now you've got Diesel in there, you've got Bret in there, you've got Shawn in there, and then you've got Owen Hart on the outside looking in, who is, you know, hey, I want you to put your title on the line. That's, you know, a good way of telling the story. And from that, you got your big marquee match of Diesel and Undertaker. That became your big marquee match that spun out of the main event feud. That's a good way of doing it. I think 97 was another good one. Now, 97 was thrown into chaos because Shawn, with his fake injury, he kind of threw everything for a loop. But it was the same situation. You had the final four of the Royal Rumble. Steve Austin cheats. He won the Rumble, but he cheated. So now they're not going to let him get away with cheating. They do the match again, the final four. Shawn gives up the belt. The person who wins the Rumble doesn't get a title shot because they're not going to let him walk away with cheating in the Rumble. So now we're going to do the final four. The winner of that match is going to be the champion. So that means, of course, we're going to have to decide who the number one contender is going to be. Bret wins the title, immediately loses it to Sid the next night. I was like, what the fuck? You know, like, I remember being a kid, I was like, why would you even give Bret the belt? And he loses it the very next night. But of course, all of it was spinning into WrestleMania 13, where Bret wrestles Steve Austin, who not only helped him win the title inadvertently, but actually cost him the title. And he was the same guy that Steve snaked at the Royal Rumble. And Undertaker, who really didn't get a fair shot, he kind of got jobbed out at the Final Four and at the Royal Rumble. And he ended up wrestling Sid, and won the title. So it all made sense. And you got your marquee match spinning out of your top feud, your top main event feud. That's probably the best way to do it. All right, Mr. VXG. Can you do an impression, oh God, of Andrade trying to recruit Keith Lee to his stable? Oh shit. I have to create a scenario. All right. So that's, I got to put some thought into that. I'm going to have to actually pause the video while I do this. It would be, all right, man, I'm going to try to do this without laughing. So it would be like, greetings and salutations, Mr. El Idolo. I got your telegram stating that you would like to have a conversation with me about perhaps joining your organization. I have to say, Mr. El Idolo, I am perfectly content operating as a solo wrestler. I have done so for the last 20 years of being myself. You're not going to try to change me, are you, sir? Would you please let me in? Tell me, Mr. El Idolo, what is it that you are expecting of me? Look at me. I'm Andrade El Idolo. Yes, I understand, I think. I'm looking at you and I see your vascularity. I see your tremendous wealth with your gold rings and your gold necklace. And I say to myself, Mr. Idolo, he's a man who seems to have it all together. And I think, yes, that is something that I am very interested in. But Mr. El Idolo, I must say, these other gentlemen in your group, they are clowns and ne'er-do-wells. I mean, look at this Mr. Cassidy. He is razor thin, and he looks like if he bends over, he may actually break in half, like a pretzel of sorts. And Mr. Quinn, I mean, who does that to his own head? How could you deal with this menagerie of losers and reprobates? Mr. El Idolo, if your recruiting standards are so low, why is it that you reach out to me? Whoa. Why are you so crazy? Let's calm down. Let's calm down. Mr. El Idolo, you misunderstand me. I do not want to get angry, sir. I am merely trying to understand how I fit in with this group of rubbish individuals. I see around me such hellacious trash that I cannot help but believe that I do not fit in here. Sir, are you attempting to change me, sir? No. This is just a business. I understand business quite well, sir. I've been in this business for quite a while, and I understand the need for good companions. I just don't know if this is an appropriate fit for me and my career, and I am unsure what the Hardy Family Office can do for me. Good sir, could you please explain to me, what can the Hardy Family Office do for me? I understand. You are looking for money? I got money. You want money? Sir, Mr. El Idolo, you misunderstand. It is always not about financial compensation. Oh, is that stock options, sir? This is one good contract, sir. Is that Blue Cross Blue Shield? Yes, good insurance, good insurance. The insurance plan, Mr. Idolo, I am very impressed. No wonder you have such a large group of individuals. You have good insurance. Perhaps I will consider this more thoroughly in my off time. Mr. Idolo, it was very nice to meet you, sir. And I fare thee well. In the future, I will get back to you when I can. Alright, that burned me out. That burned me out, trying to figure that out. Oh man, that took forever. Okay, I finally got through that. I guess we'll have to figure out whether he actually signed a contract next time. What do you think the most, Parkin Hunt, I should say. What do you think the most underrated and overrated tag team in wrestling? Oh wow. Underrated? Well, are we talking current or all time? Because currently, I would probably say Los Lotharios. They are very good, and when given a lot of time, they actually bloom and they come to life, and they've had nothing but good matches when they've been given time. Unfortunately, WWE doesn't care about tag teams, so that's a very difficult thing to say. Overrated though, oh man, I mean, it couldn't be easier than saying the Young Bucks. It's like that's the easiest, most overrated tag team ever. The Young Bucks and the Good Brothers are easily the top two most overrated tag teams of the modern day. Of modern day, the Young Bucks and the Good Brothers are easily the most two overrated tag teams. Pick one. Pick one is the most. For starters, the Good Brothers. For fuck's sake, they couldn't be two more boring dudes. It's just boring guys. And the Young Bucks are just as boring. They just have a little bit more athletic matches that are a little bit more exciting. That's it. Personality vacuums all four of them. So, pick one. Whether, as far as overrated, the Young Bucks or the Good Brothers. As far as underrated, I would probably say Los Lotharios. His second question, what is your favorite childhood memory? Of wrestling or of not of anything? My favorite childhood memory probably would be going to Cedar Point, or no, go to Babalo Island. There used to be an amusement park called Babalo. They used to be around here. I forget. I think it was in Canada. I remember going there and as a kid, and it was so much fun. When I had trips to Canada as a kid, I loved them. I like going to Canada. Going to Windsor. I don't think I made it to Toronto, but I for sure went to Windsor, and I for sure went to Babalo Island. I used to love Babalo as a kid. So probably one of my favorite memories is going there when I was younger. And going to Cedar Point. I haven't been to Cedar Point in years. It's probably been over 10 years since I've been to Cedar Point. Number 3, what movies and shows would you like to watch in the future? I don't know. Like, here, the thing is, I don't really watch a lot of TV. So it's difficult for me to really sit down and say, this is what I want to watch. Because it's like, everything that I kind of have any mild or remote interest in is probably going to be superhero shit. And I'm trying to stay away from that stuff. Like, Moon Knight looks interesting. Moon Knight looks fun. I liked Moon Knight as a character. I've read the Lemire books. I've read some of the Doug Mensch books. I've read the what was the guy who the guy before Jed McKay. Jed McKay is writing Moon Knight right now. I'm not reading it yet. I may get the trade because I've heard it's good. But the guy right before him, he's like a rock singer or something. He was doing like the Ra character. So I kind of was into the Moon Knight thing. But I'm not into Disney Plus. I don't really want to do the Disney Plus thing. I did watch Peacemaker. I did watch that. Because it was very short, so I watched that. And I just wanted to see if John Cena could pull off a TV show. And he did pretty good. I didn't mind Peacemaker as a TV show. I think they brought everything together pretty well. As far as movies, I kind of have a feigned interest in the Batman. I haven't seen it yet. Probably by the time this video goes up, I may have seen it already and will probably be prepping to do a review. But I am kind of tired of Batman. But I do want to see what they're doing with the Riddler. And I also heard the Penguin was pretty good in that movie. So I'm very interested in the Batman. But I saw Apple TV is going to have a TV show called The Last Days of Ptolemy Gray. It is a Apple TV show based off a book by Walter Mosley. And it's starring Samuel L. Jackson. And that's the reason why I want to see it. Is because it has Samuel L. Jackson as the lead character. I even looked it up. And the movie is about, or TV show, it's about an elderly man who takes an experimental drug to cure his dementia. And he has access to all of his memories. And he's trying to solve some type of mystery while his brain is working appropriately. But once the treatment is over, his brain's going to be in worse condition than it was before. And he has like dementia or whatever. So it sounds very interesting. So maybe I'll watch that. But I really don't have no interest in television. Like I spend most of my time watching YouTube videos and watching wrestling, So that's pretty much it. His fourth question. How would you rank the wrestling shows you have to do far? My favorite wrestling show, I think that's the next question. What is your favorite and least favorite wrestling show currently? All right. So yeah, this is pretty much the same question, but, what would I rank? NXT is probably the most fun to do because it's always something. I'm always going to laugh watching NXT. That's usually the most fun to do. Probably the least fun to do is Impact because Impact, it being taped and everything, it's bone dry sometimes. It's bone dry. They don't try to break out any surprises or anything because it all just gets spoiled. So it's very bare bones when it comes to Impact. And I hate the sound of that fucking ring too. Impact's ring just sounds awful. They need to do something about that because that's the only company where you can hear the ring so much, and it's awful. So that's probably it. So I definitely would have NXT as number one, Impact dead last, Rampage just above Impact. Is one of the worst shows for me to do videos for because it comes on so late and I just be so tired. It's similar with Raw, but Raw is mostly the quality of the show and the length of the show. So it'll be like NXT, then Smackdown, then Raw, because Raw sometimes have good stuff in it. So Raw is sometimes fun to do because you can make fun of some stuff. But Rampage, usually that's not a lot of stuff to make fun of on Rampage, and it's on at 10 o'clock at night. And Impact, because usually there's not a lot to make fun of on Impact. There's a lot to rant about, but not a lot to make fun of. So hopefully that answers 4 and 5. Mr. VXG, who do you think would win in a War Games match between NWA and Wu-Tang? All right, here's the thing though. There is 9 members of Wu-Tang and at most 5 members of the NWA. So we would have to add members to the NWA, and we also have to take into account that Eazy-E is a midget, and Dr. Dre is a pussy, and it'll be very hard to get to say anything other than Wu-Tang will whoop their ass. It's very hard to say anything else. I think that, Eazy-E, despite being very small, he probably had a lot of heart, and if he's allowed to use foreign objects, he'll probably do okay. He seems like a Shank kind of guy. Like if you'd have put Eazy in a fight, he probably would have stabbed somebody, or tried to razor blade them or something. He just seems like that kind of guy. And Dr. Dre, nah. If you know, nah. Nah. Dr. Dre and Yellow Boy, nah. They would need some help because Wu-Tang is nuts. Like ODB by himself is an insane human being. Him and Ghostface just alone are 2 dudes I would not want to run into anywhere in public or certainly nowhere in the dark. They just ill-tempered, and Ghostface is a fucking nut. I don't know if you've ever seen that episode of Rap City where he intimidated Tigger because Tigger asked him what was in a duffel bag, and I think he said like 8 heads or something like that. And Tigger was like, "No, for real, what's in that bag?" He was like, 8 heads, nigga. I was like, oh, see, he on that bullshit. Like Ghostface was dead serious about what was in that bag. And he is hilarious. I love Ghostface. I love him. So definitely Wu-Tang would win a War Games match. King Smart, what are you looking forward to the most at WrestleMania 38? Edge versus AJ Styles. Without a shadow of a doubt. Edge versus AJ Styles. They're not going to have a lot of time to botch that storyline. So it's only a month away. So, it's going to be okay. So Edge and AJ Styles for sure. That I'm most interested in. Dop. Do you think AEW needs to have the women on TV more often, getting some personality and matches to build believable challengers for the two titles? Because I don't buy anyone beating Jade or Britt anytime soon. This is the first question. And this is absolutely true. AEW does nothing with the women's division that does not feature the title already. There's a storyline between Chris Statlander and Layla Hirsch going on right now, and they don't really put a lot of focus on it. Same thing with Serena Deeb and Hikaru Shida. There's not a lot of focus on that. WWE is kind of falls into that same boat where if it's not the title, they don't really build up secondary, tertiary feuds for the women. And that's just kind of how it is. But you do have to have several standouts. You can't have one standout or two standouts. Because everybody's now just sitting back saying, why doesn't, Jade Cargill fight Britt Baker for the title? Why doesn't Britt Baker fight Jade Cargill for her title? Why don't they have a title for title match? Because everybody else has been beaten and they're just, basically playing ping pong ball with everybody else. Ty Conti got beat by both of them in 2 months. Anna Jay got beat by both of them. It's just kind of how it is, man. They definitely, and they certainly need to do more with their personalities. Even Jade just she kind of cuts promos, but she basically just says the same thing every time. I look like money. I smell like money. I'm that bitch. And some variation of saying every week. But it's like Britt Baker, she kind of says similar stuff every week. They definitely need to work on building characters and motivations for these characters too. That's the one thing in wrestling I would say right now is missing, is nobody's really putting any effort into motivations. Dop has a second question. Who do you think Bianca's first opponent should be coming out of WrestleMania? And when they do the feud with her and Rhea, should she win the title from Bianca? Yes and yes. I think Rhea should be the first opponent coming out of WrestleMania. Of course, a rematch with Becky at Backlash. But then after that, it should be Rhea turns heel on Bianca. And then she should win the title. I don't know when, maybe. The thing about Bianca is she is now becoming to the point where she doesn't really need the belt. And she's so over. Like, she needs to get a good run in. But she's already had one good run, with the SmackDown women's belt. So she needs a good run with the Raw women's belt. So I would probably start building the turn with her and Rhea and probably try to cash that in at SummerSlam. I would not have Rhea win like the Money in the Bank or anything though, because she doesn't need it. I would turn Rhea. They planted the seeds already because Bianca keeps, upstaging her. I would turn that key right there. I would begin the turn at Backlash. Hopefully Rhea is still over and you could have Rhea wrestle Becky in order to have Becky put her over. Becky doesn't need to win that feud either. So we think that Becky's going to be, or Rhea's going to be the top babyface. In reality, she's going to work heel. You can also use Asuka in that situation too. Asuka I think will be a great opponent in between Becky and Rhea. So from May to August. So if we push Rhea winning the title in like August at SummerSlam from Bianca, you could put Asuka in between there and have Asuka and Bianca. I think that would be great too. But I definitely think Rhea should be the one that wins the title from her. Because when you're looking at Bianca, the reason why everybody was so pissed is because she really, even though she lost in like 9 seconds or 26 seconds or whatever, she didn't get beat in a traditional wrestling sense. And so much as she got out wrestled or her opponent wasn't stronger than she was, the opponent wasn't faster. The opponent just kind of took some unfair advantage and poked her in the eye or whatever the hell that was. So you need to have a physical threat for Bianca. And since they've beaten Doudrop to death, you could use Asuka, who is a technical threat. She's more of a technical wrestler than Bianca. And then you could use Rhea, who is, strength. And you could, even though I don't think she's stronger than Bianca, you could kayfabe that she's stronger than Bianca. So I definitely think that should be the case. 3, should AEW hold off hiring more talent and build the talents they have, because it seems that a lot of these new hires just get forgotten about right after the next new hire. Absolutely. You need to have a hiring freeze. The problem here is that the person who controls the paychecks and the person who controls the human resources are the exact same person. Now, if WWE was going to say, like, if Vince McMahon was to say no more new hires, you know, now Johnny Ace has to tell people no more new hires. He's up under him. But in AEW, the guy who is cutting the checks and the guy who is doing the hiring is the same guy. So now he's like, I can sign whoever I want, and therefore he's going to do it. And he needs to have like a human resources manager. In fact, I don't believe that. He needs to have somebody who is in control of hiring and firing. And that person, you know, makes the decision to go on a hiring freeze. Because they definitely need to establish their pecking order. They try to have 42 stars on AEW, and it doesn't work out. You know, and it makes the TV bland too, because now you're overprotecting some guys, underprotecting others, and you're trying to build up big matches, you know, that end up falling flat because most people are like, we don't know who these guys are. We don't know who their personalities are, because you just keep signing more guys and just stacking them on top of each other. You know, the AEW roster is a Jenga board at this point. You know, and maybe pulling Cody out of there is going to make it all fall down, but they just keep signing more people. So I don't know what will actually have to occur for them to stop doing this. You know, it'll have to bite them in the ass some way, somehow, in order for them to stop doing this. But I don't have any idea. It's probably not going to be anytime soon, because right now everybody's pretend happy with AEW. There's going to have to be some serious grumbling that's going to need to be done from people who probably been there for a while, or, you know, and it has to be somebody on a higher level. It can't be, you know, Joey Janela, who's probably about to get gone anyway, but it has to be somebody, you know, who's been there and who people are like, kind of like, and he has to be like, look, they started signing all these guys, man, and I couldn't get no TV time. So it has to be somebody who people like, and people are not going to be like, oh, he's just bitter, he's just angry. And it has to be something, because something needs to change with their roster. They got a huge roster problem. Alto Johnson, I know it's too late, but is it possible to take NXT back on the WWE network as developmental instead of being developmental television? It's always possible. You know, the thing is, it depends on whether USA Network wants to continue funding it. WWE wanted to get NXT on TV for a while. Well, I think it might be the other way around. I think it might have been USA that wanted NXT, but WWE was holding it. You know, they just wanted it on the network. The reason why I think it makes sense to do it on television is that it's live. So now the kids are working live on national television, which is exactly what you would do on Raw or SmackDown, as opposed to working a taped show, much like they would do in the past. NXT UK is taped. It's a fabulous show, but, you know, people don't watch it because it's taped and it's on the network. It's behind the paywall. So it's very interesting. But I think that it's cool to have it on TV, but I wouldn't mind it if they put it back on Peacock. I wouldn't be too upset about that either. Jackson Rick, favorite African-American football player of all times, and did you know James Brown was a football player? And also, favorite top 5 hood movies, Tales from the Hood can be included too. All right, my favorite African-American football player, or as we call them, black football players around here, is absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, Barry Sanders. I grew up in Detroit. Barry Sanders is my favorite football player of all time. I think he is tremendous. Yes, I did know Jim Brown was a football player. Did you know Jim Brown was an actor? Some people don't know that Jim Brown was an actor. Now, hood movies, the thing is, blaxploitation movies are not hood movies. I don't believe. I think it's a different genre. Blaxploitation movies and Donald Going novels, I think, are a different genre than the hood movie, which was created in the early 90s. Now, as far as hood movies are concerned, I love Boys in the Hood. That's one. I'm not going to give you 5 in order. But Boys in the Hood is number 1. I liked Clockers from Spike Lee. So Clockers would be number 2. I loved South Central. That would be number 3. I also loved Belly. Belly is number 4. So I got South Central, Boys in the Hood, Belly, Clockers, and number 5 would probably be Paid in Full. Now, me liking these movies does not mean I think that they're well acted. For instance, I like Paid in Full was a great movie to me. I don't think that the actors were all that great, and Nas was awful in Belly, but I love Belly, right? Because it's a movie that I can watch at any time, and it's just funny. A great movie. And I love those. I love, like, they're just empty brain flicks that I just like watching. So for sure, Tales from the Hood was not something I was really all that interested in as a kid. I don't really like horror movies. They just come across as being very corny to me. Wait a minute. I could have swore I just answered this question about WrestleMania. Oh, I must have skipped that question. Black Saiyan 97. Have you ever played the Metal Gear Solid video games? And if you did, which one is your favorite? Yes, I did play Metal Gear Solid. I played Metal Gear Solid up to Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater. Snake Eater was the last one that I played, but I did want to play 4. I think Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater was the 3rd one. Metal Gear Solid 3. Metal Gear Solid 2 was my favorite game. The one where you had to play as Raiden at first, and then you had to play as Solid Snake. Loved that game. It was intricate. I liked the espionage aspect of it. I love stealth games. I didn't really know I liked them that much until I started playing Tenchu and Metal Gear. And I was like, holy shit. And it's very ironic you asked this question, because Razorfish just did a video on Hitman, the Hitman franchise, which is another stealth franchise, but it's like a Agent 47 who was like this trained killer. I like the Hitman games too. I didn't really get that deep into the franchise. Please don't watch the movies of Hitman, by the way. But Metal Gear Solid, absolutely great. Solid Snake, Liquid Snake, that was great shit. You had to fight Fox. All the weird bosses where you had to like change the controller in one of the games. You had to put the controller in the second port. Like, that was crazy. Like, I don't even remember. I think somebody had to tell me to do that, because there is no other way. Because like the villain, I think, could read your mind. So you were trying to kill this boss, and anytime you fired a bullet, he could like dodge it, or he could do some other thing. You'd be like, what in the hell? How do I beat this fucking guy? And then you had to learn how to move the controller from one port to the other. Like, that was ingenious shit. That was ingenious shit. And then I think it was Snake Eater was the one where you had to fight the bee guy, and you had to jump in the water to escape the bees. And Metal Gear Solid 2 was when you had to battle the sniper, and he would fall asleep, and you had to follow the sound of him snoring. Like those were fucking genius games, man. And Fortune was in Metal Gear Solid 2, where it was a villain that you fire a bullet, and the bullet would go around her, and the bullet would like, and it would go like, you couldn't shoot her directly. You had to find some other way of doing it. Like, it was ingenious shit. I don't know what happened to the franchise. I've heard it's gone off the rails. But when I played up to Snake Eater, it was tremendous stuff. I love Metal Gear. Steven Smith, I got a question. Why does everybody want to discredit NXT so badly? It's because they think that if they shit on NXT enough, WWE will give up on it, and it will go back to NXT Black and Gold or something, some variation thereof. It won't happen. It's also a thing where wrestling fans are taught to reject anything that has to do with Bruce Pritchard and Vince McMahon. So ever since they believe that Bruce Pritchard and Vince McMahon are taking over NXT, they just want to reject it. And they want to just poison the well constantly. So now everything that could possibly go wrong on NXT is, look, there was Vince and Bruce. Look at what they're doing. They've been doing this for 2 years, by the way. Like, they started doing that stuff the moment AEW came on the scene. It became Bruce and Vince take over NXT, even though it was the exact same show that it always had been. Triple H was still in control. He was still showing up every once in a while to do the "We Are NXT," all that stuff. But they kept saying, Vince is in control of the show in order to poison the wells so people wouldn't watch it, so they'd watch AEW. And then they successfully got people to watch AEW over NXT, and then NXT died. And now they're like, no, I want my NXT back. So it's like, it's whack, it's garbage. Alto Johnson, what was your memories of WrestleMania 18? Because I watching wrestling, I have no memories of WrestleMania 18 other than watching it on DVD. So I watched it on DVD, and obviously Rock and Hogan, you know, it says it all. Undertaker and Ric Flair. That I wanted to go back and relive that because I didn't know it happened. And it's crazy that that occurred and it's not talked about a lot. You know, we don't talk enough about Undertaker wrestling Ric Flair at WrestleMania. We don't have enough conversations about that. And I remember when I first got back into wrestling and I was watching those old SummerSlams and WrestleManias that I didn't see. And I was like, holy shit, Undertaker versus Ric Flair? And then you watch the match and you get a feel for the story and you're like, wait a minute, this is dope shit. Now, of course, it couldn't overshadow Hogan and Rock. Nothing could overshadow that. But me as an Undertaker guy, and I wasn't really a Rock guy anyway, I was all in on Undertaker and Ric Flair. That shit was tremendous. Christopher Lloyd, do you think or believe Tony Nese is the greatest free agent out there? When I heard that, I was scratching my head. That's not good. And now that he brought this all of should he stop signing people for 2 years at least? Obviously, Tony Nese is not the greatest free agent out there, and I think he's all elite anyway, so I don't even know if he's a free agent anymore. It's absolutely ridiculous that they even said that. And then they didn't even do anything with him, so how stupid was that? Alto Johnson, do indie wrestlers draw with only work rate alone? It got me thinking of Bret Hart, Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund, who have no characteristics, promo cutting skills, and charisma, just wrestling, nothing more, nothing else. Some indie wrestlers can draw on wrestling alone because a lot of people who are into indie wrestling, that's what they want to see. So they don't need to develop personalities and stuff like that. For a long time, Bryan Danielson was that guy. He was a guy that people went to go see, even though he wasn't incredible at cutting promos. He could just have kick-ass matches. AJ Styles was another one. For years, AJ Styles didn't have a personality. Everything, if you went to a Ring of Honor show or a TNA show to see AJ Styles, he didn't really have much in the way of a personality, and he really couldn't cut promos. Now, a guy like Bruno or a guy like Bob Backlund, Bob Backlund is such an odd case because Bob Backlund was not a draw, for the record. He was a top guy, he was not a draw. Bruno, however, was a draw, massive draw, mainly because of the way they booked him. He was booked like Superman, so that helped. The same booking that they would give to Ric Flair, not Ric Flair, but Hulk Hogan or John Cena. That's what Bruno had. And Bruno was, he was also a ethnic babyface for the Italians in New York. So it really worked out for him. He didn't need to have great promo skills. People just saw like Italian Superman and they were like, oh shit, that's my guy. But yeah, indie wrestlers can draw on, but they can't draw like on WWE level, like what WWE we ask them to draw. No, they can't do that. So I don't think that they could draw like 100,000 people to a building or anything like that. Alto Johnson has another question. Do you listen to Boyz II Men? If not, do you listen to any old school R&B? No, I don't listen to Boyz II Men. That's a really weird question. Like, do you listen to Boyz II Men? Obviously, I got bought a Boyz II Men tape by my mom. My mom bought me a tape of Boyz II Men. I never even opened it. Listening to old school R&B, not really. I'm not really an R&B guy. I'm more of a soul funk guy. So it depends on how you classify the genre, though. For instance, I love Stevie Wonder and I love Marvin Gaye. For some people, that's R&B. For some people, that's, the Motown soul era, which isn't technically R&B. So a lot of people say R&B or rhythm and blues is the whole thing, which includes soul music. But I wouldn't put Jill Scott or Erykah Badu in that same class as Boyz II Men and Genuine. I wouldn't do that. It doesn't make sense. They're not even similar. I think soul music is a little bit different, and that's really more my vibe. I really don't do the R&B, ride me like a pony, you remind me of my Jeep. I hate that shit. Have you ever thought of doing a podcast? Yes, I thought of doing a podcast. Maybe one day I will start doing a podcast. Fourth question. What is your favorite pro wrestling referee you wish to come back and teach these current referees how to do their job? Earl Hebner. Earl Hebner is the GOAT. I used to love the slow count. The 1, 2, 3. It was so dramatic and so definitive. Now you can go back and watch like some of those 90s shows. And like I'm trying to remember, I think he was the referee for Shawn and Brett at WrestleMania 12. And he did the very slow and deliberate count. And he was really good, and he was really good at firing back up on guys. He could play off of guys. They really lost something with Earl Hebner. He was very good. I love that. Charles Robinson is very good too. And so is, Corderis. He's also very good. Amari Parker. When do you think The Rock dethroned Steve Austin as a top draw and facing the company? I say late 99. I would say the same thing. When Austin couldn't go anymore, he got put on the shelf. They didn't have anybody else but The Rock. So, it's like, what more could you, there was a Survivor Series or something like that Austin couldn't even perform at. Was that 2000 or was that 99? I think he made his comeback at 2000. So Survivor Series 99, he couldn't even be at that show. So they did the whole who ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin storyline. And yeah, The Rock took off. It was the right move too, Darren Miles, how do you feel about Michael Moore's documentaries? I think they're very interesting, but they're obviously propaganda. Fahrenheit 9/11 was probably the only one that I really liked, because I'm not really a 9/11 truther. It's just an interesting thing to see. So I've watched quite a few of his documentaries. I can't remember. I probably have some in a DVD case somewhere back from my days as a leftist. But Fahrenheit 9/11, I actually got the other one too, the conservative answer to that. What was it? It was some 9/11 truther thing. Like, I just wanted to see, that's when I started kind of growing politically, is I was like, all right, Michael Moore put out his documentary. Now these guys are putting out their documentary and I want to see what they have to say. So I watched both of them. Needless to say, I just kind of shrugged and it was what it was. But of course, he just makes propaganda. It is what it is. All of these guys pretty much just make propaganda. Music Fanatic 34.99. Where did they find Nikita Lyons, and are there more of her? Nikita Lyons. Nikita Lyons went to the tryout. I think she went to the Las Vegas tryouts. And there probably probably not like her. Probably not. She's very unique. And I'm pretty sure that's the reason why she got signed. Is she had a wrestling background. She was already trained in pro wrestling. She had already been trained in judo. She had already done songs and she had pretty much her whole background as a shoot with video evidence. I like video evidence of her on the mats doing stuff when she was a kid and doing judo and shit, doing karate and stuff. She has a music video that's still on YouTube. So she just went to the tryouts and they picked her up. So it wasn't like they went searching through a diamond in the rough. She came to them. Who do you think will be the biggest star from NXT 2.0 on the main roster? I'd put my money on Grayson Waller or Braun Breaker being the next franchise. If they give Braun Breaker the right persona, yes, I think he'll probably be the guy. WWE gets very dogged when they like a guy. It takes a lot for that guy to go away. Cena, they was not letting Cena fail. They wasn't going to let Roman fail. And they were not going to let it happen. So they get very dogged about a guy. If they feel as strongly about Braun Breaker as I think they do, he's going to be the guy. And I think we're looking at somebody like a Grayson Waller as being like his top antagonist, maybe the Randy Orton to his John Cena. I think you could probably see that upcoming. I'm high on Tony D'Angelo too, just because of the character, and I think the character will really catch on. As far as females is concerned, obviously we were just talking about Nikita Lyons. I think if they give her the right push and they get out of her way, she could really do something. You know, Cora Jade too. Let's see. Alto Johnson is back. Why do you think championship titles in wrestling or sports entertainment have no value or legitimacy anymore? What purpose do they serve? They have legitimacy, but it's up to the person, the champion, to bring legitimacy to that title. You know, it's up to the booking also to make that title worthwhile. You have to give people a reason to care about the belt. There's that concept of the man making the title or the title making the man. When you see certain people, I'm just going to say some names: Kofi Kingston, Big E. When you give them the title is trying to make them, right? You're elevating them to this level. And now it feels all artificial. You know, it feels like, okay, a mid-card guy fucked around and became world champion. Now what do we do? It doesn't seem like when you look at a guy like Roman, when he gets the belt, it's like, okay, Roman's the guy. You know, Roman can wrestle anybody, anywhere on the card, and he's the guy. Everybody believes in him. That's why he gets the biggest reactions, even before he turned heel. He gets the biggest reactions, sells a lot of merchandise. He's the guy. When you have a title trying to make somebody, then you're trying to figure out really how to present this guy to elevate him. And that's very hard to do. And that makes titles lose credibility. Like when you look at AEW, they book their championships well. The champions always win. But nobody cares because the champions are always wrestling people who are not the most viable contenders. You know, they did their best with Adam Cole and Adam Page. They did their best, but they did job out Adam Cole. They jobbed him out just a couple of weeks before they had that match. So it wasn't like he was fighting the top contenders. Even when it came to Bryan Danielson, Danielson didn't beat Kenny Omega. You know, so it was like, okay, he wrestled the top guy and he didn't win. You know, so like, how well did you really build him up? Like, you really didn't build him up at all. You basically just used Bryan Danielson's name to build up Adam Page. And WWE does the same thing when they give a mid-card guy the belt. You know? But they seem to be a little bit more obvious with it. Like, they gave Kofi the belt. All of a sudden, he's wrestling Samoa Joe and Dolph Ziggler and shit. He ain't wrestling Randy. Well, he did wrestle Randy Orton. But he's not wrestling like the tippy top guys. You know, he seemed to be off to the side with the title. Stephen Smith has another question. What do you think is going to come with the lawsuit with MLW and WWE? I think it'll get tossed eventually. It's probably just going to be a waste of money for MLW and WWE. Ultimately, unless MLW has a hellified proof, this thing's going to get tossed, man. You know, you got to prove WWE knew a lot of stuff about their deals with Tubi and actively interfered with that. You know, there's a lot of barriers they have to leap over, and then they have to hope WWE doesn't countersue. I mean, Darren Miles, what do you think is the future of New Japan? Mediocrity. I was looking at the New Japan Cup earlier today, and I was just looking at this, and I fast forwarded through most of the show because I'm like, I don't want to see any of these guys. Like, I like Sonata. I like Shingo Takagi. I like Sho. I'm a big fan of Sho. Sho had a hell of a match at the New Japan Cup with Hiromu Takahashi. But the booking of the show is just wrestling for the sake of wrestling. That's what New Japan is. So, you know, until they get some more crossover stars, which is what I was talking about earlier in this video, crossover stars. You need more crossover stars. They're just going to be where they are right now, which is unfortunate. Darren Miles, Omari Parker has a question. Do you think Braun Breaker should get the Brock O2 push? No, because I think Brock getting that O2 push probably is what ran him off the business so quickly. He got pushed way too fast. And I think they just wanted him to make it. They just wanted him to be the guy so badly. And they just loved the look so much. And then Vince just was like, fuck it, give him the belt immediately. And it was probably the wrong idea because it really, skyrocketed Brock's ego, And he began thinking that, he was bigger than the business, or he was sick of the business so fast and he left. It's just by happenstance that he ended up coming back. But no, I don't think anybody should get the Brock 02 push. I think that Brock won the title too soon. I think he should have won the Rumble and won the title at WrestleMania that year. Should have won the title in 03 instead of beating The Rock for it in 02. But maybe they didn't have a choice because The Rock was leaving. So who knows? Darren Miles, what's your favorite guilty pleasure wrestler? Mine is New Jack. That's a good question because I usually like dumb wrestlers, man. R-Truth is really fun for me. Santino was fun for me. I love The Miz. A lot of people really get up frustrated. You have no idea how many times I have conversations with people and they say you hate Kenny Omega, you don't like the Young Bucks, but you like The Miz. Yes, I love The Miz. The Miz is a great promo. He knows who he is. He's very smug. He makes everything he can do. He makes it work. I love The Miz. Just address me as king. This ain't even a question. Just do the Pete Dunne voice. What's up with these voices? I'm the baddest man in NXT. My face is like a pizza pie. Amari Parker. Favorite shows from each network: Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network. I don't have a favorite show on Disney. I never watched Disney. Nickelodeon, Rugrats. Without a shadow of a doubt, I loved Rugrats. I liked Hey Arnold. Loved Rugrats. Cartoon Network, probably Dexter's Laboratory. Big fan of Dexter's Laboratory. Also, a pretty big fan of Johnny Bravo. I liked both, but I love Dexter's Laboratory. That was the one show that I watched pretty much all the time, was Dexter's Laboratory. Whenever it was on, I was watching it. Rugrats was my thing when I was in my youth. I probably wasn't a small kid when that was on, but I really did enjoy Rugrats on Nickelodeon. I also like Hey Arnold. Alto Johnson, which NBA player is the worst actor of all time? Shaquille O'Neal, Dennis Rodman, Ray Allen, or LeBron James? Now, Ray Allen was bad. He got game. Ray Allen was fucking awful. Now, I haven't seen LeBron James outside of him really being cringe in that commercial where he's talking to his CGI young self. That's trash. That's absolute booty butt cheeks. But Ray Allen, oh my God, bro. I didn't see anything with Dennis Rodman in it. And Shaq, I don't think I saw the Shaq movies. I don't think I saw the Shaq movies either. So by default, it's got to be Ray Allen. Because I love He Got Game. And he is the worst part of the movie, is Ray fucking Allen. He's fucking awful. He's terrible. Keith Bearcat Lee. Thoughts on Keith Bearcat Lee? You misspelled Keith Bearcat Lee. I think the more they talked about it, the more I think it was a rib. They gave him the silly gimmick to piss him off, to see him get mad, and he didn't even answer that. So it was what it was. Jason Mike, how would you book AEW Revolution match card in your opinion if you was a general manager, and how would you fix SmackDown and what they need help? Thanks, Mongo. I think I said this in the AEW Revolution in the review, is I probably would have chopped an hour out of the show. So that trios match or the 6-man tag they had, that was a tornado match, I would have took that out. I'd have changed that. I also probably wouldn't even have Jurassic Express as the tag team champions. It probably just would have been Red Dragon versus the Young Bucks, or Red Dragon versus FTR. I don't see why you wouldn't go that route. So that would change. Ty Conti and Jade Cargill wouldn't be on a card. That's a TV match. It wasn't until unless I actually took time to build a legitimate contender for Jade Cargill, she wouldn't have been on pay-per-view. Now, Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, you can get away with putting that on pay-per-view because they have history. But Jade Cargill and Tay Conti, there was no reason for that to be on pay-per-view. The rest of the card, I think, was very solid. The ladder match, I probably would have changed some of the competitors in it. I certainly wouldn't have had three big dudes, three big muscly guys in it. I'd have probably changed the contenders. But, I mean, and it certainly wouldn't be a giant fucking donut. I wouldn't have had that either. That's stupid. Darren Miles is back. Do you feel about incels or guys who can't get women in general? Now, this is a very interesting question. Now, incels are a very interesting subject because a lot of people feel bad for incels and a lot of people hate incels. But I think you have to think about what kind of incel it is. Now, if you have the Supreme Gentleman style incel is dangerous. As we learned, I don't know if I talked about this on this channel, but Evil. I read this book from I forget. I think his name was Berkheimer or something like that. But it's called Evil, and you learn that evil does not come from people with low self-esteem. It comes from people with high self-esteem, and so you have to separate high self-esteem incels from low self-esteem incels. Low self-esteem incels put girls on a pedestal, and they're scared of girls. They're socially awkward. They're weird looking. They're not quite sure how to talk to women. They're no threat to women. All right. They're no threat to men. They're no threat to women. They're beta males, essentially. They don't know how to talk to girls. That's their main problem. They're probably what they call genetic trash. They have weird deformities. Like they might have like that, the weird Adam's apple. They might look like David Bixenspan. They have like pop marks on their face, crooked teeth, stuff like that. They're socially awkward guys. They're very nice dudes, but they're unattractive. And they're not quite sure how to get over their unattractiveness through confidence. They may be self-deprecating. They may talk about themselves in a negative way, putting themselves down. Usually you have to help those guys build some confidence. And that's really what gym bros try to do. Just hit the gym, bro. And it's like, you're just telling the guy to get some confidence. And that's basically what it is. The nerds who you see at Comic Cons and stuff like that, those kind of incels, you don't got a problem with them. It's the high self-esteem incels that are our problem. And I think that when people start talking about incels, they need to understand that not all incels are equal. When you talk about the Supreme Gentleman being a guy in the United States, for people who don't know, who went around, he shot up a sorority because he couldn't get a girlfriend. And he was socially awkward too. He was very weird, but he had very high self-esteem. He truly believed that he was God's gift to women and that women are just too stupid to date him. They're just too stupid and worthless whores. They should date people like him, not other guys, not these jocks, not these dudes. They shouldn't be dating guys like them. Those guys are also beneath me. They should be dating me. And when you have that kind of mentality, you're a dangerous, dangerous dude. That's when you start having the situation where you have, power, or you think you have power, or you are upset by your lack of power, and you start doing things like shooting people and abusing people. So always understand, a low self-esteem person is more danger to themselves. A higher self-esteem person is more a danger to other people. So that's like one of the things that I really learned, especially in reading books and understanding male behavior. And especially since I loved listening to like MGTOW content. You could tell low self-esteem MGTOW from high self-esteem MGTOW. High self-esteem MGTOW are very brutal when it comes to women. Very brutal. Low self-esteem MGTOW always talk about being a victim. Why would you want to be married when, the court system is going to fuck you over? Why would you want to, have children when you're going to get the kids taken away from you? And then you have the MGTOW who say, well, I'm the prize. She should have to do all this stuff for me, and you need to have some confidence, but you can't be that way where, you're putting yourself too high on a pedestal. Because that's off-putting as well, and it becomes a self-fulfilling, vicious cycle where you put yourself on a pedestal like no woman wants to deal with that, and then you can't get women, or you running the women off, and that's a problem too. So it all depends on what kind of guy it is, and I understand there's a lot of guys who don't know how to talk to women. I was one of them, and I think most of us were. Most young boys don't know how to talk to girls, and you learn through trial and error. It's just that some people are very socially awkward. I am too. I'm very socially awkward. Nobody likes rejection. I'm very sensitive to people talking about different things. Some people are very sensitive about their weight. They may be sensitive about their hygiene. They may be sensitive about their hair, their face, their teeth, or, something like that. And it's hard to walk up to somebody and talk to them, knowing that they could be looking at you and seeing, all of the flaws that you have. Helping people get over that kind of stuff should be what talking to women should be about. And I think that in society where, everybody's doing all this dating online, it's making this more difficult. If people could be forced to talk to each other, a lot of these guys who are quote unquote genetic trash will get over it. They will fish in the rivers and the lakes that fit them, and that's usually a big problem for boys too, young guys, is they want to, as TLC say, chase those waterfalls. They want to date the models and the cheerleaders. They want to chase the girls that every guy wants to bang. But those girls only want to bang top level guys. They only want to date the quarterback or the football player or the point guard for the high school team. You're a guy who likes playing chess and watching Naruto. She's not going to fuck you. All right. Once you realize that, you can start fishing into the chicks who might like Naruto and chess. And look, they might not be the best looking chicks in the world, but they might be very nice and they might be very dedicated to you. So that's a good thing. Now you're not an incel anymore. You can get girls. You're just not going to get, the most pretty girl that everybody in school is chasing around. And that's okay too. You got to be happy with what you can get. Sometimes there's a level of settle there, cause if you are, like I said, man, there's, athletes, football players or whatever, they get cheated on. They're scared of girls too. That's why they spend so much money on chicks, cause they don't want to have to talk to them. If I throw some money at her, she'll go to bed with me. You ain't never had a conversation with that bitch. You don't know nothing about her. She laid down with you because you was paying her. That's the only reason. That's not game. That's not personality. That's nothing. That's, you tricking, So understand, whether he got money or he don't got money, a trick's brain is the same regardless. He doesn't know how to talk to girls. He's just paying her. One can pay her off. The other one, she probably wouldn't even take money from him. But I don't think that much about incels. But when I do, incels, MGTOW, that kind of thing, the red pill male society. I was in that stuff for a little while because I wanted to understand it. And you have to understand that there's a difference between people who are low self-esteem and people who are high self-esteem. People who are high self-esteem, they are vindictive. They're angry. That's the problem. People who are low self-esteem, they need to just build some confidence, and maybe going to the gym will help them. But most of the time, it's not going to be a simple thing as going to the gym. It probably won't. They need to actually go out and do things, build real confidence. Going to the gym is just base level. What's your favorite hood movie? This is Mr. VXG. What's your favorite hood movie? Boys in the Hood. Washington Eli. Is CM Punk underrated or overrated in your opinion? And also your 5 favorite movie of all time, top 5. And what's the best era of music, 80s or 90s or 2000, and why? All right, let's break this up. Is CM Punk underrated or overrated in your opinion? He's overrated. I like CM Punk as a wrestler. I think he's a great promo. I think he's a serviceable wrestler. I just think that some folks think he's the coming of Jesus, and it doesn't bear out in the numbers, in terms of him being a draw or anything, or even in his match quality, So I think he's overrated. My favorite movie is probably House of Flying Daggers, which is a Chinese movie. I just love that movie. First, it was Hero. Hero was very good too, also a Chinese film. I love the Chinese movies. They're very colorful. The characters are very deep and layered. House of Flying Daggers is tremendous. My favorite American movie is probably The Godfather. Although I do love Carlito's Way as well. But my top 5 favorite movies, oh boy. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That's probably another one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's a fantastic movie. All right. I watch that movie by myself right now. I watch it tomorrow if I could, if I gotta go to work tomorrow. So that would be one of them. Hero, House of Flying Daggers, Scarface. Matter of fact, I don't like Scarface that much. Casino is what I was thinking of. Casino is fantastic. Goodfellas. I love movies like that, the gangster flicks, but not so much Scarface. And what's the best era of music? That's a good question, because music in the 80s, it becomes very electronic. We're coming off the death of disco. So I think that probably the best music came out in the 60s, if we're being honest. The 60s and the 70s. You know, because that's when you started getting a lot of the really good funk bands. And the funk bands and the soul music is the bedrock of hip hop, which blasted on the scene in the 90s and really became, well, hip hop existed in the 70s in a very rudimentary form. And it came to national prominence in the 80s, with, you know, Ice-T and LL Cool J and all those guys. The 90s is when they really started blowing up. You had Tupac and Snoop Dogg and all that kind of shit. So that's the rap music I grew up on, was like 90s hip hop. And a lot of that stuff samples like the 70s. Like you listen to Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, The Chronic and Doggy Style. A lot of that stuff is them sampling like the OJs and a lot of the 60s and 70s acts that they grew up on. And that stuff is really good. And Kanye West, even in later years, started doing the same thing. He went back and sampled Shaka Khan. I think that Shaka Khan song was from the 80s, though. You know? So for me, the best music comes from the 60s and the 70s. I love that stuff. I love the funk, soul era. I love it. You know, it's just produced so much good stuff. And the 80s was okay. But that's when we started seeing like Bobby Brown and Al B. Sure. And I was kind of like, nah, man, this ain't really for me, dog. It's not really for me. R&B is not really for me. You know, I think R&B music is for women. You know, that's just kind of how I am. It's not really masculine enough for me. Mo the Killer. What is the reason that Batista or Randy Orton was not the face for WWE like John Cena? Well, Batista was kind of old. I think Batista was 35 when he first got to the top of the card in WWE. So he came in a little older than everybody else. And they knew his shelf life was going to be lower than theirs. He was constantly injured, especially when he won the title. So he kind of got screwed over. But Cena was a tremendous merchandise machine. That's the major difference. Randy Orton's a dickhead too, so that's another reason. You know, Randy Orton was just not likable as a person. So it made him very hard to be a top babyface because he wasn't charming. You know, he's a good looking guy, but he was a dickhead. Cena was, of course, felt a lot more charismatic. He sold a ton of merchandise. So that's the number one thing, is that the reason why John Cena was the top guy was he sold a ton of fucking merchandise. You know, the spinner championships, all the t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. He was killing it on that. That's the major response right there. But if you look at their personalities, the way John Cena was able to handle the pressure versus how Randy Orton couldn't handle the pressure, Randy Orton didn't start actually maturing probably until well into his career. Again, Cena was world champion for a long time, and Randy Orton was still shitting in people's bags, still bullying the valets and the young girls on the road. This was in 2006, 2007. You know, he had already been world champion by this point in time. He's still just being a douchebag. And then he was still bullying people in 2009. Like, Randy Orton just was not the face of the company material. You know, he just wasn't. And it just so happened that Cena was able to just take that spot from him anyway, even though I think it was probably earmarked for Orton. That's why they gave him the belt first in 2004. And he won it from Chris Benoit. They wanted him to be the top guy, but he was too immature and it just wasn't going to work out. And so they ended up giving his run to Batista. So Batista ended up taking the spot, and Batista's a little bit more mature, but he's not the merchandise machine that John Cena is. So they swapped them and moved Batista to SmackDown and moved John Cena to Raw. And that was the smartest decision that they ever made, because Cena was tremendous, you know. So I guess that answers the question. Is, you know, you look at the numbers, Cena sold more stuff. All right. Thank you guys for playing along. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, donate to the channel. Thank you guys for your time, and I will talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.